Hey everybody, thank you for watching and listening again. It's Dan Sfera. Today I've got Peter Niemi. He works for Adform. He's the life sciences, right? Or is it healthcare? Director of Healthcare Digital Media?
Yeah, I manage the healthcare vertical practice for Adform. So we place a lot of digital media on behalf of pharma and healthcare
So the
clients.
entire healthcare vertical. How many different verticals does Adform get into?
Oh, they cover a wide range. There's a lot of travel, a lot of telecom. I mean, it varies by region. It's a global company.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
um, Vodafone's a big client. Coty,
Yeah.
uh, the big beauty brand, is another big client to site
Mm-hmm.
non-pharmas. So yeah, there's quite a lot of coverage in
And
a variety of verticals.
Peter and I interact frequently on Twitter. You should all go follow him. And we did a video before. We did an interview back in April. I just saw my archive, so it was back in April. So we're due for another one. I don't know if we ever got into your background. Like, how did you get started in? First of all, how did you get started in advertising, and then how'd you get into digital, and then how'd you get into healthcare advertising?
Sure. Well, I can answer pretty much all of those questions with my first real job, which was I was hired at a company that later became the Gray Healthcare Group. So it was a healthcare advertising agency. And I just kind of grew up there and all through the 90s as the web was becoming what it is now and commercializing. I was there and always been a technology person, so I've just kind of evolved with the industry. Was introduced to ad tech probably about 10 years ago as the programmatic field started to grow, and
Okay. Did you
and I've
learn
been.
that? Did you learn all that? Like, do you know how to code and all that, or like how deep do you get into those algorithms?
I'm not a coder anymore. I certainly was. I was a programmer. Probably haven't written any code in about 15 years.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it's just on the strategy side now, but I certainly know enough, and so I can speak to the engineers without embarrassing myself.
Okay,
Um,
interesting.
yeah.
And what have you noticed so far about the pharma world and particularly clinical research? I mean, we were just talking before we started recording. They seem to be like 12 to 15 years behind when it comes to these things.
Always. I mean, part of that is understandable. It's a very highly regulated industry. That's the common excuse. However, I would hold up a mirror and say, "What about finance?" That's a pretty regulated industry too,
Right.
and they're known as being pretty fast adopters
Are they?
of technology solutions, certainly compared to pharma.
Are they? Okay, I've always wondered
Com-
that.
Sure, you've seen digital financial advertising. For
Is there any vertical? Because I'm like siloed into this pharma world. I don't know other worlds. Maybe a little bit of real estate. Um, are there any industries that are slower or further behind than pharma, or are we like last place?
last place.
Last place. No hesitation there. Last place.
Yeah, yeah, and in fairness, I like you. I've been in healthcare marketing all my career. So
Right.
I touch on other verticals as just as a matter of interest, but this is where I live as well. And yes, it is. I will frequently see other industries, making advances or adopting some new technique, and then 10 years later, our industry starts figuring it out.
But isn't that good? Doesn't that provide opportunities for people such as myself and yourself? I mean, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We see what's working. We're given the luxury of having like this long runway of being able to study other industries and say, okay, this worked for them, this didn't. Now pharma's ready to implement. Let's execute, right? Do you think that's an
I think
advantage?
I think it's a really good point because we are sitting right now and we are talking about pharma marketing and specifically the trial, right? So
Yep.
reaching patients and using digital targeting for patient recruitment, and we can absolutely look to what travel companies have done, what consumer packaged goods companies have done, and literally take the technology tools and adapt them to pharma. Look at how the travel industry has made it so that you can sift through flights and different ways to get places and sort through the dates and all the different variables you can plug in. You can do a Boolean search. You can do a SQL search
Sure.
for flights. Why
Yeah.
can't I do that to see you for trials?
Mm.
It's the
It,
same tools because
so
no one's
many
applied them
opportunities.
yet.
So many opportunities. Now, what are some, for anyone watching, I want to give them some practical advice. If they're just starting out, let's say they're listening, they're like, hey, that's good. I do want to make sense. I want to track other industries and see where pharma is going to eventually be. Like Wayne Gretzky said, I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is now. So,
Hmm.
uh, what are some blogs, books, I don't know, magazines? What are some resources you can share with people so that they can keep track of these kind of things? I always want to hear what other people are interested in, and I know I follow you on Twitter, but I'm not always on there.
Yeah. So good question. I mean, the field, as you know, evolves so fast. It's there's not going to be any printed resources because by the time something's printed, it's changed.
Right.
What I found a really good mailing list to subscribe to is Bulletin Healthcare. It's a daily email list, and they always just home in on the right article. They give you, 4, 5, 6 one-paragraph summaries.
Bulletin
Every
Healthcare. I'm writing this down.
Bulletin Healthcare. Um, really pithy summaries, and the links to the main article is always sourced, so you can drill through. So I found them to be really valuable. It is obviously very healthcare focused.
Hmm.
Talks a lot about media. It also talks about regulatory things and all of that. But that's a real valuable one. And then the trade rag for my industry for the healthcare marketers is MM&M, Medical Marketing and Media.
Medical
Um,
marketing and media. Okay.
yep.
Is that a blog?
And no, that's a website and actually a printed magazine as well. It's
Okay.
been around a long time, so it does tend to focus on agencies and traditional marketing, but they've been doing a pretty good job of adapting to cutting edge stuff and talking to the digital people.
Ah, right
Um,
up my alley now. Now that I'm delving into this world, the agency world a little. So I'll check those
yes,
out. Yeah, thanks, Peter. So
sure.
I guess since the last time we spoke, I mean, you know, the industry is such a laggard that probably not much has changed. I mean, we were just talking off the air, you know, the recruitment strategy is almost identical in 2017 for how to get patients in a study as it was in 2005, right? I mean, they might
Mhm. Yep,
they might consider Facebook now. Facebook didn't even really exist in '05, and now they'll consider
yep.
running some ads on there. But other than that, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing, right?
It has evolved, but the big number, like the fail rate, which is, I believe, still around 60% of trials fail to meet their recruitment goals, um, has really not changed. There are definitely some digital developments. Facebook just held an event here in New York where they invited pharma marketers and their agencies in to talk about using Facebook specifically for patient recruitment. That was a really kind of groundbreaking development. And that really came out of, however, the agencies who are looking for better ways to do this. And at the end of the day, unless you're going to make a big investment, we can talk about what I do in programmatic tools and data, which does require uh, investment and expertise. Facebook will rent their data to you. It's very plug and play. You put in your targeting criteria, you do your geo targeting. It's very accurate. Gets a good CPA, so it works. AdWords similarly. So a lot of the agencies are driving that, and then Facebook turned around over the last 6 months or so and went, "Wow, we're getting all these requests from pharma companies. There's money plowing through our system. We have to adapt our own regulatory because these are
Yeah.
clearly pharma ads. They're not for brands,
Mm-hmm.
but they're clearly health-related ads, so we need to be careful."
Let's talk about
Um,
that. Actually, I'm glad you brought that
sure.
up because we wrote an article on that on the Clinical Scoop. So yeah, Facebook met with pharma marketers, and I know you've been following that closely. So uh, obviously, they see that there's a huge opportunity for clinical research organizations to increase their ad spending on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
pharma companies. So was it in Facebook's idea to have this meeting, or was it from the pharma side? Who decided to put this together?
Um, I would say, and I'd have to speculate, but like I said, I think it was really the the growth and the use of Facebook was driven by agencies, by people like you and me who are looking for better solutions and are just being creative and aggressive. And then Facebook saw the demand and went to a couple of conferences. And I'm finding the same thing. And obviously, I'm no Facebook, but I'm finding the same thing in my business. Everything we're talking about has kind of come about from demand because I work with pharma brands too, and I talk to pharma brands and they're doing digital, and then I talk to the people on the early stages in the recruitment, and the interest is galvanizing. It's immediate. We can do that. We can capture data. We can recruit. We can find patients in new and interesting ways. We can target. So it's just really interesting, and the willingness to try to get in is just very, very high.
So they're waking up now. Pharma's waking up. They're like, okay, Facebook's here. We didn't realize we can target at this level on this
Right.
platform, and now we can capture um, a list for our current trials, for our future trials. Um, so let's do that. Let's do that instead of print and TV. Maybe we should allocate some more funds there. Now, what was the result of the meeting? Because I know Facebook had some restrictions for pharma companies as well, right?
Well, they just went over some of the targeting capabilities. They talked about the regulatory restrictions, and we'll see where the growth goes. Where the growth goes from there. I think what you're really seeing shaping up is there is a growing recognition of the fact that there's a lot of money spent on this, right? There's a lot of money spent on direct to consumer,
Mm-hmm.
billions of dollars. There's a lot of billions of dollars that's spent on recruitment, right? So
Yeah.
non-branded early stage advertising, and there's a jockeying for position for those dollars. Google's doing it as well, and obviously Adform is a player who's waded in and been
Yep.
probably a little early to the party, but obviously without the monopolistic capability of a Facebook or a Google. With short and sweet with Facebook, if you're a recruiter, you go to Facebook to recruit. They're basically renting you their very, very robust user data. You don't own it,
You
but you
renting
can
it.
rent it, and it will work day one. And you can get in, for a few $100s, for a few $1,000s,
Yeah.
you can get in. With a programmatic approach, what I'm doing with Adform and what some other players are doing, it's more long term. You're gathering data. If you're recruiting for an Alzheimer's trial, why are we doing them one at a time? When I think Eli Lilly has got 8 or 10 Alzheimer's trials, all in recruitment this year currently.
Yep.
Why are we doing them one at a time? And I don't mean to pick on on Eli Lilly. Why aren't we just doing a broad? And that really is, I think, the interesting point we should dwell on a little, is that all of these things, the major issue is that all of these things are done one at a time. You're assigned a trial to recruit for, and you go out and recruit for it. Usually whoever is doing they fall short of the goal, however much they fall short, or it takes too long, or whatever. Boom, we decide the end point has been reached and we're done. We close the books. As opposed to setting up a really high-end repository of all of the information and allowing everybody to come in and target and recruit for trials. Look, this is good for everybody.
They're
I
smart.
think
They're getting smarter.
it's
So
getting
yeah,
there. It's getting there.
yeah. Lily's doing. First time I've seen. We're actually participating in it at one of our sites. They're doing basically a database study where they're compensating sites for anyone in their database who has Alzheimer's and on any kind of medication
Yep.
to enroll in the study. It's not really a study. You're just doing a couple of rating scales. They're going to get an MRI and they're building their database. So they're essentially paying sites to do a study, which is a very easy survey type of study where
Right.
anyone can qualify, almost anyone, I mean, within reason. And then they're building up their database. So to them, it's almost like an advertising campaign, really. It's just disguised as a study, right?
I think that yes, and uh, I've been following what Lilly does pretty closely. Joseph Kim is the real
Yeah.
driver over
Yeah, they're
over
probably
there.
one of the more innovative ones.
I think they're the most of an innovative one.
Yeah.
I say that with with incomplete data, but that's exactly the type of approach. Um, with one caveat, they're still doing because they're capturing data, right? At the end of the day, you
Right.
want to build up that database and you want to be able to go out and target people, much like you can go to Facebook and use their data. Lilly is by definition, right? They're going to focus and they're going to use this data for Lilly sponsored trials, which currently make up, last I looked, they had about 75 or 80 sponsored ongoing trials listed on their website in this country currently. That's out of 20,000
Right.
recruiting trials listed at CenterWatch. So if Lilly covers 75 out of 20,000, are they really helping the whole industry to the level that I think it needs help?
Right. No, they're just helping themselves, but they're serving as a benchmark maybe. Um, with these new initiatives that they're bringing on. The same thing with another. I literally had a phone conference earlier with another group, and they're working with a biotech for not an Alzheimer's study. I can't say what it is because I'll give it away, but basically the same kind of idea. They're doing like a study before the study. So they're talking to physicians and they want them to go through their charts, through their medical charts, and they want them to do a dry run clinical trial. So you're not actually enrolling the patients, you're
Yep.
just entering their data, and it's all de-identified, so it's HIPAA compliant and all that. But they're entering it in an EDC system, and then they're gonna know, the sponsor is gonna know, which sites are probably gonna do a decent job recruiting. So it's like instead of a feasibility survey, they're doing the study, but they're paying for it because they're compensating the sites. Um, I mean, it's interesting. I think sponsors are willing to pay for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so that idea of doing what you call just observational studies where you're not
Yeah.
actually doing any real testing, but you are identifying people is very smart. And the biggest purveyor of that right now is Google. Between
Well,
what 23andMe is doing, where they have literally tens of thousands of people in their database, and the Google's Verily, their baseline study, where their goal is to enroll and observe 10,000 people over 4 years, which I think it's about a year in, so the next 3 years
mm,
from now.
okay.
And these are all observational, but again, it's this huge trove of data that can be, and 23andMe in particular wants to mine that data to look for genetic similarities.
Interesting. So when you sign up for 23andMe, in the fine print, it probably says your information will be de-identified, but can be used to help out in research, right, or
Yep,
something
and
along those lines.
you certainly have to opt in and go through informed consent. Absolutely. But yes,
Uh,
absolutely. And they want to look for markers so they can, predict predispositions for disease or
wow.
make genetic.
That'll be a game changer. That and Apple's trial kit, right? I enrolled myself in a study. I was in the control group for a Parkinson's study just through
Yeah.
my iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I went through the consent process, and now they have my data. But they're really looking for Parkinson's patients, so they obviously have that data there. So yeah, Google and Apple are sort of at the cutting edge of all this stuff. Who would have thunk?
They absolutely are, and it is interesting to watch it develop because you're absolutely right. On the hardware side, on the patient monitoring, Apple Watch dominates. They got the SDK out. The Apple Watch obviously is a very elegant and relatively
Yeah.
inexpensive device as far as trials go. Google's also put out their own hardware, but with not so much adoption.
Mm-hmm.
But on the data side, the traction they've got with Verily and with 23andMe is is
Interesting.
some light years ahead of anyone else.
But pharma's so behind. I mean, by the time they actually adopt these things, do you think they'll just leapfrog over all these other kind of ad strategies like what you're doing with ad form, what I'm doing with content marketing? They can just leapfrog that and do the fully automated version with Google and Apple Watch. I know we're early, and pharma is not known for making those kind of leaps. But do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I don't. I think that it's not that simple. There is a huge education process. The number I think we touched on, but kind of got away from before was so if the study came out, and I'll have to look up the reference for you, that 75 to 80% of people, when asked, said they would participate in a trial if it were appropriate and a good match. And so then that begs the question, well, what percentage of people, U.S., this is U.S. only, though the numbers don't change that much globally, what percentage of people actually participate in trials in any given year? And that number, depending on how you calculate, is somewhere between 4 and 8%.
Yeah.
So 4 to 8% actually participate, whereas 80% say they would. You've got a marketing problem.
Right?
You've got 80% of people are willing to use their product, but only a fraction of that actually are. So there's an education marketing problem that goes hand in hand with all of
Awareness.
these
Yep. Yep.
cute. Yep.
I think research trials are not, and probably with good reason. I mean, they're expensive enough as it is. They don't necessarily want to spend more money on branding, but I think they need to think more about branding just a little bit more. Let's say you get an advertising budget. Okay, instead of using 100% of it on traditional ads, use 95% of it on that and use the other 5 for building your brand, and you're making a long-term investment, but I think it's going to pay off for whoever does it. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with our Alzheimer's talk. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how this stuff plays out. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that that's it's someone who real and the what is it, the CIS CRP,
Yeah.
they put a big insert in USA Today about clinical trials and why you should participate in clinical trials. That was just a few months ago. You can see it on their website. It's the USA Today insert. That's the right direction, but that's a relatively small organization.
Right.
This requires, and the resources would not be large, but larger than what they're putting to it, to really elevate the profile, demystify clinical trials, and make it easier to get through them. What I would suggest you try is go sign up for the baseline study, Google's baseline study, and just look at the process. Look how it walks you through the registration process. It tells you how many more questions you have. Everything's in clear English. It's a beautiful UI. And then, go and try to register for a clinical trial at a typical site.
Here.
It's all legalese and medical jargon. And, I'm in the industry. And after about 2 minutes, I'm like, my head's spinning.
And
So,
before that, you got to sit in a waiting room, and then you got to talk to the receptionist, and she doesn't
yep,
know that you're there for a study. She thinks you're a patient. By the time they figure out you're there for a study, you've waited at 30 minutes longer than you needed to. Yeah, I mean, we see this stuff all the time.
yeah, oh, absolutely. So it's that combination of making the data universally available and digestible to a layperson. Again, look at the baseline study, which
Hmm.
does a very, very nice job of that.
That one
You know,
and the Empower one on for iOS. Same thing. It walks you through the consent. I mean, and they give you a quiz afterwards to see if you
yeah,
understood, and if you don't, then they sort of guide you back towards where you went wrong or what information you didn't digest properly. Fantastic. I was actually amazed by how well executed it was, and I haven't tried the Google one, but I'll do that.
yeah, I have to check that out as well. Yeah, I think those are great examples. There are examples of how to do it.
Yeah.
Um, they're they're small examples, and they're mostly with the baseline. It's an observational study, so
Yeah.
they're not actually testing products, right? This is
Hmm.
not real clinical research. Um, so that kind of capability exists and needs to be applied to recruitment for
Man.
drug testing, drug pharmaclinical trials.
So much opportunity here, but back down to present day 2017, which these things
Yep,
are occurring, but they're outliers. That's not the norm.
sure.
What? How is Adform? Do you guys work with research sites like standalone research clinics, or mostly with CROs and pharma?
We mostly work with the agencies doing the recruiting
Oh,
for
with the
pharma.
age. Okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean that's who the pharmas, with exceptions, of course, and we do have some direct contact. The pharmas tend to take each study and give it to an agency that then is responsible for the media and the content and the creative.
Like an
And
Accurian or someone like that.
Curian's one of the big boys,
Hmm.
Curian and
Study
Inventive,
Kick.
yeah, they're
Uh,
about 50 to 100 of these agencies. Accurian's a huge one. A lot of them tend to be smaller. Oh, it does. This better than me.
hmm.
So they farm that out to them, and then they partner with a variety of people for capabilities that with vendors, if you will. Facebook is one of them, and AdForm is another capability. And we have we have clients that are using the platform and recognizing the fact that this is a long-term play. And so as they're recruiting, they also recognize they're building up their data,
Right.
their bank of data that they own.
Hmm.
Facebook doesn't own it, Google doesn't own it. When you use our platform, the client owns their data and can repurpose it as they need. So, you envision the day when, as you talked about retargeting right at the top, to get back to, as you said, 2017, what can you do right now? Well, if you're recruiting for 8 Alzheimer's trials, the first one, yes, you're going to have to use third-party data, and it's going to take some time and cost some money to get people to engage with your content. For the second one, it'll be easier because you're starting out with data already. You're retargeting on day 1, not day 60.
Hmm.
And by the third and the fourth, et cetera,
Exponential
and
growth.
right. And essentially what Facebook is doing when you go to Facebook is you're retargeting. You're using their data to reach a qualified audience essentially immediately, as opposed to prospecting,
Right.
which normal media has to do.
Organic, yeah, content. Okay, I get it.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, we got to do more of these talks. I feel like every 2, 3 months is a good schedule for us. We can sort of
Yeah,
catch up on the state of
I
the industry and see how things are going.
love watching what you're doing on Twitter and your other channels, and absolutely, always good to exchange ideas and keep abreast of what's new. I always learn something.
Yeah, how do you feel about Twitter? The clinical researchers, that seems to be their, uh, other than LinkedIn, that Twitter's like their platform, their favorite platform. There's a lot of conversation, well, not a lot, but there's a decent amount of conversation around clinical research. I need to get more involved in that. I used to be very active on Twitter, and I need to get back into it.
It's they're all on there and they're all chatting. We both cited Lilly today, so they're extremely active on it. And if you look, pretty much all of the major CROs are on there and keep and tweet on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, I need to start
So yeah,
using that more. I've been
yeah,
using the video reply as a hack to stand out more, rather than the traditional tweets.
yes.
So interesting. Okay, Peter, anything else you want to talk about?
Now I think we've covered quite a lot, and we're probably starting to run over. Don't want this to be
Yeah,
too lengthy of a snippet, and we'll come back and revisit it
thank you very
before the end
much.
of the year. Certainly,
For
let's get
sure,
back
we'll do
together
a
again and
year-end wrap-up. Where can people find you, Peter?
drop me an email, peter.nemi@adform.com, and my Twitter handle's at Peter Nemi. So look forward to connecting online.
And that's Niemi. N like
Got
Nancy, I, E, M like Mary, I.
exactly right.
All right, thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone else, and we'll catch y'all later. Bye bye.